Hi, this is Heidi from Garden Crossings, and wow, what a difference a month makes in a garden. If you watched my July garden tour, I want to thank you for watching it. I had a record amount of people that viewed that, and I'm sure it was probably you, and I thank you for that. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love it if you could take a minute and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That just helps us with getting more viewers, and we'd appreciate it if you were one of our subscribers. So it is mid-August, and I'm going to take you for a tour through the garden tonight and just show you the differences in what a month can make in a garden. So I want this video to be laid out quite similarly to the July video. That way, if you want to kind of do a side-by-side comparison, you can kind of see the difference that July to August has made in the garden. So we're going to start off again in the front of the house, and I'm just go through the different flowers and talk about them a little bit. And hopefully I hit some questions that you had in the previous video. So let's go ahead and get started. So in this container here, this is an aqua pot. And you can't even see the pot, but it's a beautiful cobalt blue ceramic pot. That's a self-watering pot. So this plant, I only have to refill once every week. And right now, basically everything in this planter has been taken over by a new sweet potato vine for 2021. This is Medusa. And typically I'm not a huge fan of sweet potato vines. I don't typically use them in much, but I do like this one. And I think it's the texture of it. I just love how it's kind of drapey and kind of hangs over. The heavily serrated leaves are really cool. And you can see there's some Angelonia poking through. There's perfectly pink and also Angelona angel face blue. But the Medusa is really, really cool looking, and it's fully taken over this container. In the front of the house, we have the Supertunia Vista bubblegums, and you can see they are continuing to do very well. In this front area here, this is 5 plants, and then down a ways is 3. So these get watered and fertilized every day. They are on a drip system, so they get watered daily and then fertilized once a week. Behind there, we have the lilac chip butterfly bushes, and they're still blooming, but they are starting to kind of have more of the spent blooms than the actual flowers. But again, it looks really nice. You will see I do have some planters that don't look so great. So way in the back, that's an aqua pot that had some sun patience in it, and they started to get spider mites, and the spider mites won. So even in my garden that seems like it looks really nice, there are things in here that aren't great. So if you have a garden and you're like, mine doesn't look good, or this is going wrong, don't worry about it, because even in a garden like mine, there are places that don't look the best. Sun-credible sunflowers, that's 2 plants there. That's a sterile sunflower, and it blooms virtually all summer long. So it's bloomed early season and will bloom well into the fall, as long as we don't have like freezing temperatures. My 2 hanging baskets are doing really nice this year. They've kind of turned around. They were looking a little bit not that great earlier, but I think they're looking really nice now. That's got the Bordeaux Supertunia along with the Sangria Mini Vistas. And then there's some Dichondra Silver Falls in there as well. I should have put a few more in because it looks kind of silly with just those 2 little silver falls. So next year we'll have to add more in. My front planters, well, they definitely look better in the July video, and that's okay. Like, everything has its season, and sometimes some things look nicer than others. And right now, these are not really in their prime. That was last month. In the container here, we've got the Lobularia Dark Night, the Dichondra Silver Falls, perfectly pink Angelonia, and then there's a sun patient in there too. And the sun patient, again, that sun patient is not looking super great. We've got the bubblegum Supertunias, and behind them are the Bobo Hydrangeas, and they are looking really nice right now. That's a grouping of 3, and you can see how compact those Bobos are. So they won't get taller than that window. So it's kind of a perfect foundation plant if you're looking for something to plant under a window that gives a lot of color but doesn't take up a lot of space. As we take the corner here, we've got the lilac tree that needs a big trim. That's getting way too big. Underneath it are the Anna's Magic Ball thuyas. And the thing I like about those is that they're evergreen and they're just very compact. So it's kind of a nice little evergreen that you can kind of poke into different places that don't take up a lot of room. And the chartreuse yellow I think is pretty cool as well. As we take the corner here, we have the Vista Snowdrift Supertunias. This is a planting of 5 of them. And again, they're just a really nice ground mat of color that is good for full sun to part shade locations. Behind it, we have the Quickfire Hydrangea. This Quickfire is probably about 8 foot tall and 8 foot wide, and it's really at its peak right now. I'll go in for a closer look. And these lace cap blooms, they started off white, and now they've taken on their pink appearance. And I would say, honestly, this is probably peak, and this is mid-August for this Quickfire. Quickfire is one of the earliest blooming hardy hydrangeas. So if you're looking to start your hardy hydrangea color early, Quickfire is one of those that will start with early color for you. Going down the hill here, I've got 3 bobos, and they do not look good at all. This area doesn't get watered very good, and you can definitely tell. Like they're really browning out, and you can see, like, as we go closer here, you can see how they're kind of like dead in the middle. So this is not a great location. It is a good location, it just, we need more water on them, and they're not looking good. Between the bobos, we put some Pugster butterfly bush in, and this is the Pugster purple, and it's doing quite nicely. You can see all the buds and the beautiful purple blooms. Behind it is Hardy Hibiscus. Some Russian sage is the purple, and then the hydrangea there is a limelight hydrangea. And that one, the blooms are just starting to nicely open. We have another Hardy Hibiscus here. I believe this one is Perfect Storm with a nice dark foliage and the bicolor blooms, kind of a light pink white and then a deep magenta eye. They're fairly compact, only about 4 foot tall. As we take the corner, this is the Bobo. This is an incredible, I believe this was incredible blush hydrangea, and the flowers are totally spent now. They have a lime green color to them, and even though the flowers are done, I still think it looks pretty with that lime green kind of shape of the flower remaining. It still has character, even though it's not the color that it was when it was in its prime. We'll kind of pan down here. Actually, I'm going to get that from a different angle because the sun is kind of bright right now. Got to walk around a huge tree. All right. So this is a blue chip butterfly bush. Very compact, only about 2 foot tall, 3 foot wide. Butterflies really like that. The lime green is Coleus limetine. And then you're seeing a lot of little white speckled in, and that is the diamond frost euphorbia. And then we had tucked in some caladiums, which obviously were smaller than the diamond frost, so they're kind of getting lost. Between this arch here in the back, just below the hardy hibiscus, there is mini mauvette hydrangeas, and you can tell they have spent, the blooms are done, but they still have nice texture in the garden there. This area here is looking a little bit wild, but you know, gardens go through their stages. And we had a whole bunch of extra Angelonia, the angel face purple, so that's kind of tucked in the back corner there. I don't know why, but it adds a nice little splash of color. Then you can see we have a drift of the Coleus Wicked Witch, and that's just kind of drifted into the garden. The red you're seeing, that is an Alstroemeria, that is Inca Jolie, and the peach one here is Inca Ice. So both of these are one plant each, but you can just tell how much more aggressive the Inca Ice is than the Inca Jolie. So the one thing I like about Alstroemerias is they're one of the longest blooming perennials in my garden. So virtually they'll bloom from beginning of summer until sometimes November, depending on what the temperature is. And they're also a great cut flower, so you can continue to cut on this plant all summer and have beautiful flowers. Tucked in here, the lime green, that's Coleus again, lime time. And then we've got the snippet lime woodgillas against the house with a mini or a little quick fire in the middle. And then on the other side there is another of the snippet lime woodgillas. So the little quick fire is pretty much done flowering. Not quite as intense colors, but it also doesn't get as much sun. So I think that's a little bit of why we're not getting a lot of color out of that. But again, that was placed under a window because it's not going to get that tall, and it should fit good right there as a foundation planting. We'll spin this around and take a look. So under the deck here, this gets a lot of shade in this area. And you can see I've done a lot with the hostas. So I kind of like big hostas, and you can see a lot of these in here are quite large. So most of the color right now is just primarily foliage color in the form of hostas. Although we do have a rogue Rebecca that we planted those a long time ago, and I thought I had them all out of there. But this one keeps coming back, and I'm okay with that because otherwise there's just no color in this garden. We'll kind of walk over here. So this little area here is, again, kind of losing its luster. Against the window there are the Limetta hydrangeas. There are lantana planted in front. Last year lantana did really well here, but this year I'm just not getting a lot of color out of them. So every year, you know, different plants do different things, even though they're like really the same plant. So lantana last year did great. Lantana this year not so much. This little area up in the front has, you can see the polka dot plant kind of just stuck in there. And then there's Nepeta, which was trimmed back, and it's just starting to kind of reflush out. And then the yellow flowers you're seeing, that is Heliopsis Tuscan Sun over there by the pole. And the one closest to me here is Tuscan Gold. The front of this border is the Lemon Coral Sedum, and that's really pretty. That bright yellow pop, I think, is really stunning in the garden. Behind this area, now this area here faces east, so it gets sun till about noon, maybe 1, 2 o'clock. So in this area here, we have the Vista Paradise Super Petunias with the Vista Snowdrift Petunias. So that's that bright splash of color. And then behind it, there are some coneflowers that are kind of fading. And then a little clematis there on the trellis. There's pink mink and Venosa violacea also on there. And then behind that trellis, we planted some Diamond Mountain, which is the white euphorbia. And then I don't know if you can see it or not, but kind of the airy plant, the pink, that's Gara. And that's really kind of wispy and looks kind of neat there. It just kind of fills in a gap with a nice airy looking plant. Also in this area, we have the Cleome Senorita Rosalita, and that was planted as kind of a thriller, and those are doing really well. There's some pretty much, not pretty much Picasso, but Picasso and purple petunia, some Moonglow Osteospermum, and then again we carried that Snowdrift Vista along this full border. The hydrangeas you're seeing, those are mini mauvettes that are finished flowering now. And planted behind them, we did the Rockin' Salvia, Rockin' Purple Salvia, I believe it is. So that's kind of more of a hummingbird type plant, but it also gets taller than those hydrangeas. So it just adds a nice little bit of purple there in the back of that garden. Clematis we have growing up is the Jack Manny. So it's almost done flowering, but this has been flowering for probably about a good month now. So that's pretty impressive, I think. You can see we've got a few more of the Rebecca that kind of just found their home in a random place, but I think it looks pretty nice there as well. Sometimes it's the little surprises you find in your garden that are some of the best surprises. So is there something in your garden that just randomly showed up one day and you're like, I don't know where it came from, but I'm loving the looks of it? I'd love to hear below. All right, so we're gonna head over and start heading back. So this little area here, as I've said before, this used to have a big maple tree, and the maple tree blew over in a storm. So we took the maple tree out and just did a very repetitive planting in this area. So what we have here is, there's a hummingbird. I'm going to zoom over, see if you can see him. Just hovering right above the alstroemeria. He's really checking out this garden back there. I love it when nature comes into the garden. Sorry, that was kind of a squirrel moment. All right, let's talk back about this garden again. So this area has a lot of repetitive things in it. The main plant in it that is kind of the anchor plant, I guess, would be the hydrangea in the middle. And that is a limelight standard hydrangea, which basically means it's like a tree. So it's been trimmed to look like a tree. Now I can see there's a lot of branches that are starting to kind of droop over. The blooms are so big, and we've had to really train this tree because when we got it, it was kind of a train wreck, really. So we've been trimming it every year just to try to get it shaped nicely. And this is honestly the first year out of 3 that it's looked nice. So I think it's really pretty, and I just love the canopy of flowers that the limelight is giving for this little space. Also repeated in this space is the bloomerang dwarf purple lilacs. So again, it's August right now, and check out all those flowers on that lilac. So bloomerang dwarf purple, it only gets about, this is about 2 to 3 foot tall and 2 to 3 foot wide. So very compact, but it blooms virtually on and off throughout the summer. So if you're somebody that loves lilacs and loves the fragrance, but you know, they're kind of a spring thing, this is not. So this will continue to give you flowers and a beautiful scent throughout the summer. August, lilac blooms, unheard of. Also in this garden, we have my Monet Weigela, which is a spring bloomer, and then, you know, it's got these beautiful pink flowers in the spring, but here in August, look at the beautiful foliage. It's got that 2-tone, actually a 3-tone, but typically green and white, but look at the tips. Beautiful little hints of pink. So the Weigela, my Monet, is a great plant to add foliage interest when it's not even blooming. Behind that, we have the heuchera, and this is heuchera wildberry, which right now you can't see it so good, but earlier on this season, you can, because the plants, especially these red sun patiens, aren't this big, and so you can see that tucked in there, and that looks really pretty in the spring with the Weigelas and the lilacs. Although we might have to move it because these lilacs have grown a lot this summer. They've probably doubled in size, so that's been pretty impressive. We also have the Atlas rose in this garden, which peach and red is kind of an odd combination, really, but we kind of did it not on accident, but just kind of as a trial, and I'm really impressed with how that peach looks with the red and the white in this garden. So this was definitely one of those plantings. We did it intentionally, but it turned out better than what we were even imagining it might turn out. So sometimes dare to just try something different, because you never know. You might really like the outcome, and you wouldn't know if you never tried. So go ahead and try something different, because you might just be pleasantly surprised with the outcome. So you can see this whole little area here is pretty much just the hydrangea limelight, the bloomerang dwarf purple lilacs, my Monet Weigela, and then the Atlas roses with a couple of the wildberry heuchera tucked in the middle, and then a lot of red sun patiens for a consistent, constant splash of color. We're going to head down into the butterfly garden now and just take a look at what's changed since last time we were watching the video. One thing that I think is a big thing that I'm noticing is the bobo hydrangeas. So the bobo hydrangeas are no longer in their prime. They are still looking nice, but not in their prime. But I still think that they're giving a lot of color. So the two here up in the front, these are both bobo. The white that is bordering this whole garden are white sun patience. And I do that because I like the way that the white glows at night. So it kind of creates a really pretty moon garden look. This butterfly bush here up front, this is the Miss Molly butterfly bush. And I just love the pink blooms of Miss Molly. So we have Miss Ruby and Miss Molly. Miss Molly is my favorite of those two. And I know everybody kind of has different opinions, but I love the magenta color of the plant. All right. So this is a lot of perennials at this tip here, and most of these are spring bloomers, so there's not a lot of color. The pink here is Angelonia perfectly pink. We'll see how this works going into the sun. Here's a Heliopsis. This is Tuscan Sun, and that's a long blooming perennial as well. Very drought tolerant, likes the full sun. If you have a hot spot in the garden, Heliopsis is usually a pretty good choice. Got a huge cluster of cone flowers here, and most of them are kind of on their downward coloration, so they're kind of washed out looking right now. Not a whole lot of bright colors, but I love, back in my July video, how much color the cone flowers gave. I have a Sonic Bloom Pink Weigela, and this is blooming for its third bloom cycle. The spring is definitely the best, but right now, for it being its third cycle of blooms, this is pretty impressive with all those beautiful little pink blooms. And this is another bush too that the hummingbirds love. So this garden here is a butterfly hummingbird garden, and you can see maybe that monarch is kind of in here right now. Definitely, if you're doing a butterfly garden, you want to make sure you're having plants that the pollinators really enjoy. In front of me here, this is Rockin' Blue Suede Shoes Salvia. This is a plant the hummingbirds love. So they kind of go into those little flowers, and they love the nectar of the salvias. Behind it, I have the Rockin' Fuchsia Salvia. It's a little bit shorter. We've also got the Suncredible sunflowers in here with a bunch of different Angelonia just for some height. Monarch in the garden. Yep, still haven't planted those caladiums. Can't even tell that they're not in a pot hardly anymore with it just sitting there. Don't laugh. I'm one of those people too. So if you got things sitting in your garden not planted yet, it's okay. Let's see here. We've got more of the Rockin' Fuchsia Salvia. We've got the ultraviolet phlox. This is a brand new phlox for this year. And it's really small right now, but next year it'll probably be about 2.5 to 3 foot tall. And I think that pink is going to look amazing with that white bulbo behind it. So here is an opening act phlox, the kind of lavender color. That was trimmed back and now it's flowering again. So I think that is pretty cool. I always love it when you have plants that you go ahead and give them a trim and they come back again for like a second show. That's great. Even if that second show isn't as impressive as the first show, that's all right, because it's something that had you not trimmed them back, you maybe would have never had those flowers. Kufia vermillionaire is this orange plant. This is another plant that the hummingbirds love. So I forgot to put this in my garden last year, or we sold out of them. And I just really didn't feel like I had as many flowers, or I didn't feel like I had as many hummingbirds. So I made sure that I got a couple of these in the garden this year, and I definitely have noticed that the hummingbirds have been enjoying it. Tucked in the middle here, we have a pugster butterfly bush, pugster periwinkle, and I just love the huge flowers of the pugsters. So if you've never tried the pugsters before, the flowers, basically if you take your hand and try to wrap it around them, you can't, because they're just so thick. And then each of the flowers gets to be about 10 to 12 inches long. So really big flowers as well. So we'll kind of back up here and kind of show you the butterfly garden from this view. Sorry, you get me in the picture. Videos are always better during the day when it's not evening, because then your shadow's straight up and down. All right, so in this little area here, first of all, I have a delphinium here, and this thing was beautiful, except for it got so tall that it cracked, and so I was so sad. So I trimmed it back. I got a tomato cage, and so now I'm letting it kind of climbing that tomato cage, and I'm hoping that will give it more support so it doesn't crack and break. So we'll see. So far it's doing pretty good. In the back there, we've got more coneflowers, and that's Baja Burgundy. That has been one of the most impressive coneflowers that I've seen this year. I have loved the color of that Baja Burgundy. More of that phlox that's rebloomed. And then we have a Hardy Hibiscus blooming. I believe this one is Perfect Storm. So these are huge dinner plate blooms. They're about 8 to 10 inches across, and definitely something that is great for like late summer color in the garden. Every butterfly garden, like I've said before, you have to have host plants for some of the pollinators and some of the butterflies. So here we have Asclepias cinderella. And this is one thing I want to point out. I'm just noticing it is loaded with aphids. So you take a look there, you see all those little orange things? Those are aphids. And I know sometimes that freaks people out to have aphids in the garden, but I don't want to treat this plant, because if I put some chemicals on to kill those aphids, that's also not going to be good for the butterflies and the caterpillars, because it's going to harm them as well. So sometimes you just have to be okay with nature doing its thing. That way you can have what you're trying to have in your garden. So I'm trying to have monarchs in my garden, and this is the host plant for monarchs. And I'm going to have to live with those aphids, because I want to make for sure I have the proper plant for the monarchs to lay their eggs, for the caterpillars to eat, and for the cycle to repeat itself on. So I don't think it looks that bad. It's not really harming the plant. So aphids it'll be. And if you notice, I'm not seeing them on any of the plants around that plant. They're pretty much just sticking right to the Asclepias. So that's all right. This beautiful plant here is the firelight hydrangea. So I know in a lot of advertisements, when you see the firelight, you see it has bright red blooms. And I've had this before where people get their firelights and they're like, I got the wrong plant. It's blooming white. I'm going to show you that little hummingbird. He's sitting right on top of that, by that blue bottle there. He's just waiting for wherever he's going in next. So again, another squirrel moment, but I love hummingbirds, and they're so pretty to watch in the garden. All right, back to firelight. If you keep watching over by those blue bottles, maybe he'll take off soon. But anyways, firelight, a lot of advertisements show it as bright red, and it does get bright red, but it starts off white. Flowers have to go through transitions. And so it starts off white, starts to take on a little bit of a pink tone, and then as the flowers continue to I don't want to say mature, but as they continue to age, they're going to take on that deep red color. So definitely a plant that has transformation, and it's beautiful also to watch it as it does its transformation. These make great cutting flowers or dried flowers. So if you like to dry your flowers, go ahead and cut them when they're at kind of the stage you want them at. I always recommend hanging them upside down to dry as they kind of get nice and crispy, and then you can use them in your floral arrangements if you'd like. So see that hummingbird, he's just listening to what I have to say. He's still sitting there. All right, let's head on back to the Hosta garden now and show you what is going on in the back corner. So we don't have a lot of shade in the garden. This is kind of our shady spot for most of the day, and so we're utilizing it with pretty much all hostas. There are some Lenten rose in here and a couple ferns, but this is pretty much filled with hostas. So with hostas, I usually in the past haven't been a huge fan of hostas, but when I saw what you could do when you take them and mix them, I became a little bit more of a believer that hostas do have a place in the garden. So I do see some spots too, so that means I can add some more hostas in. Oh, it looks like I did already down in that corner. Just got to wait for that one to grow. So sometimes when plants die, it's kind of like, yay, I can try something new. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I kind of like it once in a while because I can try new things. But anyways, if you look at all the different colors and textures and sizes, there are so many hostas, and there's so many great attributes with them. So when you're planting a hosta garden, be sure to take in mind into consideration different colors, different sizes, different textures, because I think you can create a pretty cool look by just choosing the right plants. All right, and as we take a turn down here, you'll notice that the hostas are still hostas, but there's other things kind of dabbled in. And that's because we're getting into more sun. So I have to kind of change now the type of plants I'm using. One thing I will point out is the border along the grass. Those are all sun patients. And that is sun patient, I think it's blush. And those are doing really well. One tip I will give you with sun patients, they do not like fertilizer. So make sure you keep them watered, but don't fertilize them. The flowers will kind of shut down if you fertilize. So that was something we learned, and I always like to pass that tip on when I have the opportunity to. So you'll see there's red tucked in. Those are all caladiums. Right now it's a lot of hostas. There's astilbes also that are in this area, which are done flowering. And then we've also tucked in coleus. So coleus is a great plant for foliage color. And I think a lot of people think, well, coleus is for shade. Why here? It's in full sun. So the color blaze coleus are wonderful because most of them can grow in full sun to full shade locations. And honestly, the more sun they get, the better the coloration is. So don't be afraid to use your coleus in full sun areas. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. The one that we're seeing here in the back, this is Wicked Hot. That's a new variety for this year. And typically I don't do a lot with orange in the garden, but I think that really is pretty and plays a nice role back there. In this area I have, you can see up front there, 3 bobo hydrangeas along with some Atlas roses and some mini mauvet hydrangeas. This is just kind of an awkward, weird place in the garden. And so we're really trying to figure out what is best here. So a little bit of trial and error goes on every year, and we always add a few more things in and hope for the best. Right here, what we're kind of focusing on, this is an anemone. It's not blooming yet, but that will be blooming probably in another month or so. It looks like 2 anemones with a Amsonia in the middle. So if you look on the outer edges, you'll see little nubs of buds, and that's the anemones. That's a Fall in Love Sweetly anemone. Some more coleus and hosta. You can see the bright red hardy hibiscus there. That one doesn't really get enough sun where it's at. It gets sun towards the end of the day, but they really need to be grown in a full sun location. So I think that one could be doing better if it was getting a little bit more sun. Alliums are finally blooming. This one here is Serendipity. I've gotten a lot of questions on what is the difference between Allium Serendipity and Allium Millennium. I also have Allium Millennium in the garden, so we'll be talking about that in just a little bit. But the difference between Allium Serendipity and the Allium Millennium is Serendipity has a little bit more blue to the foliage. And my understanding is Serendipity means kind of like an unexpected occurrence. And so when they were looking at the block of Allium Millennium and noticed the blue foliage, they knew it was a new plant, and that's where the name Serendipity came from, to my understanding. Both of them are about the same height, same width, and this one's about 18 inches tall, and it'll get probably about 18 to 24 inches wide. This area here is a really dry area in the garden. We have some more coleus back there. That's the Wicked Witch coleus. There's some hydrangeas that are done blooming. We tucked in a couple polka dot plants. That's the pink right here. And then there's some spirea, some lavender, a lot of things that were more of our earlier season color. Another coleus patch there for just a splash. This area here is my daylily garden. So I just wanted to do like a big cluster of daylilies so you can see like all the different ones blooming together. And so daylilies kind of have their seasons unless if it's a reblooming daylily. And so this area had a lot more color last month, but you can see there's a couple in here that are looking really pretty. And I really like this one in the back here with a nice scalloped edge. So At least there's a few things. And I probably should try to find a few more reblooming daylilies just so that there's a little bit more color in this area for longer, but it's okay. We have more sun patiens that are lining the path. We just switched over now to the purple sun patiens. And so I think next year I'll probably do the whole thing with purple sun patiens. I think I'm liking the purple look a little bit better than the blush look. It just has a little bit more of a pop to it. Nephophia, that's another fairly long blooming perennial in the garden. There's that one there. And I think we've got about 5 or 6 different varieties of Nephophia. So different heights, different colors. There's oranges, there's reds, there's yellows. And then there's combinations of all of those colors where you can get like a bicolor type bloom. Back there by the shed, that is the little lime hydrangea. That one gets about 5 foot tall. It's just starting to kind of pinken up a little bit. So I'm going to show you actually 3 different hardy hydrangeas kind of all together so you can kind of see sizes. So this is little lime. Little lime is about 5 foot tall. Way up back there, that's limelight, and that gets about 8 foot tall. And we'll do a quick turn here. And I'm going to actually get it so the sun isn't so bright on it. This is Bobo, and Bobo is about 3 foot tall. So Bobo, limelight in the back, and little lime next to the shed. So really there's a lot of plants, shrubs especially, that there is a perfect size shrub for any size garden. So a lot of our shrubs come in kind of like small, medium, and large options. Forsythia, that's another one that has different size options. So definitely if you're like, I love this plant, but it won't fit in my garden, take a look and see, because there may be a shrub that is what you're looking for, but in a smaller or larger size package. Tucked back in this area, this is kind of a little messy area, but I'm okay with having messy areas in certain places. So what we have in front of us is the Rudbeckia. This is Henry Ehlers. It's just starting to bloom, and I'll go in and show you. So these flowers are kind of, that's what they are. Like, that is an open flower. And you can see they kind of split, but I think I like the looks of them. Like just the nice, airy blooms. So they get to stay here because it's the perfect place for kind of a messy or unkept plant, and I'm okay with that. Tucked in the middle there is the Glamour Girl Phlox, and it's holding its own against this big mass of the Henry Ehlers Rudbeckia. The Hardy Hibiscus is blooming here, and the Japanese beetles have made it extra special, meaning they've given it a real lacy look. No, that is not desired, but as long as they're flowering, I guess I have to look past the lacy look. Sometimes you just have to accept what's going on in your garden, and definitely this is a case of accepting that the Japanese beetles are doing a number on this plant, but at least the flowers are still there. We'll back up and show you the incredible hydrangea, which still looks pretty nice, but you can see that the white blooms are now taking on a lime green look with just a little bit of browning to it. But if we weren't so close from a distance, it would still look like it's in its prime. So that's the thing with hydrangeas. I mean, don't be so quick to give them a trimming if the flowers start to look a little not perfect, because even from a distance, like, well, I'll move out a little bit. Even from a distance, they have some shape, and they add some texture and stuff to the garden. Okay. Oh, I was going to show you the allium millennium. So this is millennium. It's a little bit further along in its bloom than the serendipity is, but it's also an older plant, so that might have a reason. The alliums are an excellent pollinator plant. We'll go in for a closer look. And this is just loaded with bees. There's all kinds of native bees on here, and honeybees, bumblebees. So definitely a plant that attracts the pollinators. But if you don't want bees in your garden, don't plant this plant, because it's going to attract the pollinators, which I think every garden needs good pollinators. Tucked in the back here, we'll zoom in on that trellis. You'll see the purple. That's Clematis raguchi. That's got beautiful purple bell-shaped flowers, And that's one of the longest blooming clematises in my garden. So that will bloom for upwards of 2 months and just continues to go strong that full time. On this little trellis here, it's almost done, but you can just see that massive foliage. This was the pink, well, it still is, the pink mink clematis. And I'll zoom in so you can see these beautiful littler size flowers, but the mass of them, when this thing was blooming, it was just a sea of pink. So pink mink, smaller flowers, but lots of them. So I think just the amount of flowers you're getting from the plant is worth it, even though they're not the large flowers like a lot of other clematises are. Behind this Allium millennium, we have the Senorita Rosalita. It's an annual. It's pretty tall, so we popped it in there just to kind of give a little bit of height in this area that stays consistent throughout the summer. In the background, this tall shrub right here, that is Rhamnus fine line. And that's a beautiful shrub if you're looking to add like a columnar look to the garden. You can see that thing's about 12 foot tall, but it's only about 3 foot wide. So it's a great kind of a pillar looking shrub. It does lose its leaves in the winter, so if you're looking for something that's evergreen, that's not going to be the plant for you. But that thing's hardy down to like zone 2 or 3, so it's super hardy even in super cold climates. Up front here we have a spirea, and the spirea is pretty much done blooming. It was trimmed a little bit, and I can see that it's getting just a couple little repeat blooms going on. So it's kind of nice that it's still doing a little something, even though spirea's prime was like early summer, late spring. Behind it there is a baptisia, and baptisia, they're a plant that you definitely need to commit to. They have a root system that goes to China. So if you have a mature baptisia in your garden, its roots are nearly in another country. They are hard to move once they are planted. So make sure when you plant your baptisia, you are sure that's where you want it. They're a great spring bloomer. When they're done blooming, like you can see here, it looks like a shrub. So it's got a great look even when it's not flowering. But it definitely is a plant you want to commit to the location you're planting it in, because it will be very, very difficult to move should you ever want to move it. I'll put it this way. We hooked a tow strap to our truck, snapped the tow strap, and broke 3 shovels trying to get one out before we finally said dump some Roundup on it and hopefully it just kind of dies in the ground. Not this one, it was another one. Oh, this plant here. This is a proudberry plant. So from a distance, you probably can't see, but I'm going to go in close. This plant is amazing. So it's not like a typical plant that a lot of people have in their garden, but it was flowering earlier in the season, and then it had all these little, looked like little blueberry clusters, but now those little clusters are ripening, and look at those beautiful pink flowers, or they're not flowers, beautiful pink berries. So this is just starting to show some of those pink berries, and like I said, it's very early in its season, so, but you can see all the little clusters of berry buds just starting. So once this thing is in its prime, it is going to be loaded with these beautiful pink berries, and this plant frequently has berries on it in November and December still, so it holds the berries for a long time. Another thing I'm noticing on this plant right now is there's pollinators all over it. Again, there's a lot of bees, and I'm also seeing like some wasps on it. So another plant that is a pollinator plant. So again, it will bring the stinging friends to your garden, but if you leave them alone, they leave you alone. Let's go in for a little closer look. There's a bunch of berries there. So if you're looking for something different to add to the garden, proudberry, definitely something I recommend. We'll back up a little bit, and you can see there's 2 Coleus lime thyme there, which add a real splash of color. And then there's sedum in front of it. Beautiful black sedum. Here's another sedum here with a beautiful weed. So this is just a nice ground cover sedum that kind of fills in the gaps. I also have a huge hibiscus. This, I believe, is Perfect Storm. Dark foliage, large flowers. And I think the dark foliage hibiscus is just, it's something different. You know, your garden's got a lot of green going on. When you add these dark black foliage plants in, I think that's really pretty, and it makes a nice backdrop to some of the plants that are actually green. You can see the big flowers. They usually last just a couple days, but look at all the buds. So there's a ton more flowers coming on this plant. This little area here's got some dark night lobelia planted in it. I love that plant. It also has popcorn plant. So this is a fun plant if you've got kids or grandkids. You rub the leaves and it smells like buttered popcorn, which is really odd for a plant. And it's got beautiful yellow flowers as well. So this plant's about 4 foot tall, 5 foot tall right now. Now this is my clematis wall. Pretty much all the clematis, except for a few raguchi that are still blooming, are done for the season. So this was beautiful. I have 6 or so different clematis on this wall. I just love to mix them up because when something's not blooming, maybe something else will be, just to kind of continue to have color on that space, because it's a big space with no color. So by planting different clematises, that just helps make the season of color in that space longer. All right, we're gonna head this way, kind of walking backwards here. This is Wine and Roses, Wagila. There's some Vista Paradise petunias tucked in there. And we're gonna end here with the Limelight Hydrangea. So here's my Limelight Hydrangea. That's about 8 foot tall and is in its prime right now. One thing I want to tell you with this Limelight Hydrangea, because they do get kind of big, is we're not afraid to trim our plants. So I'm going to end this video with a tip that I think you might find encouraging and helpful for yourself. So if you have a Limelight Hydrangea or a Hardy Hydrangea, don't be afraid to trim it. Typically the rule of thumb is trim about 1/3 of the plant down, and when you're trimming shrubs, typically they say go ahead and trim a 1/3 off the top. Well, this plant sometimes is bigger than what I want it to be, and so I'd say every 3, 4, maybe 5 years, probably every 5 years, we go and trim this guy down to about 18, 24 inches. We're talking way down in there. And you might even be able to see, probably not, but you can probably see some of the cuts that we've done. It was scary. It was really scary for me to go and trim this down to about 18 to 24 inches. But the year after I did that, my flowers were 18 inches long. The flowers were huge. It's because they were putting all the energy into, the flowers on the new growth. So definitely don't be afraid to trim your plants. Honestly, they'll thank you for it. And I always say too, like if you have a shrub that you think, I don't know if I really like it, what have you got to lose? Go ahead and trim it. Worst case scenario, it dies, but hey, it leaves you an opportunity to plant a new plant. Or best case scenario, it comes back beautifully and you think, why did I not do this sooner? So don't be afraid to go ahead and trim. This is Heidi from Garden Crossings.